Hi, everyone. I hope I was able to give you a presentation on how to do some homeschooling, but I'm discovering the topic with you, and these 3 days have been quite challenging. So I will stick to the presentation and talk about how to enroll with the local system in Brussels. I guess many of you are wondering how to have his or her children registered with a school in Brussels, a local school, and especially understanding the difference between the curriculums, the different systems, the French and the Dutch speaking. We'll go through a few slides together and then have room for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So, Pauline, I need to go to the next slide. Yes. So we will first go through the overall landscape of the education possibilities in Brussels, have a look at a curriculum in its entirety, so from the age where children have to go to school till the moment they are not obliged to go to school any longer. We will have a look at how to register with the different systems, and then maybe give a thought on how to choose the system, the language, the network you want to have for your children. We'll have a few words about how to get diploma equivalency. I will share with you some useful websites, and then, as announced, we will have room for questions and answers. Let's have a word over the overall landscape of education in Brussels. I think we should all keep in mind that an international education is anyway a great opportunity. I know that as a parent, when we are moving, relocating from one place to the other, ask our children to adapt to a change, we always have a feeling of guilt, and we are asking ourselves, we are sometimes having doubts, is this really what the best for, is this really the best for my children? All in all, we should really trust and be aware that for our children, being in touch with an international environment, having to adapt to a new environment is in all cases a great opportunity. Belgium has a lot of international cities, which makes actually the experience of going to a school where you do not master the language possible. It's not, you're not a unique case. Being an expat child or having another language at home than at school is a situation that are that many kids are facing, actually. Whichever the local school you go, you would be surprised to see the proportion of pupils or students that do live in that multicultural or international environment. Many of them speak another language at school. Many of them have parents that do speak different languages. So I would say it's normal. It's normal. It's due indeed to the mixed population that we have in Brussels, and that explains also why we have in Belgium 3 main systems. The diversity of the population in Brussels made the existence of international school extremely necessary, and we then have quite some international schools in Brussels, existing alongside the local public system. And we also have a mix of both, what we then call the private system or the semi-private system. And these are all schools who have a certain support from the government and that are funded by other sources for another part. So naming international cities, of course, we have Brussels, but we also have Waterloo, we have Ghent, we have Antwerp, and we have Leuven. Today's focus will be on Brussels, right? Especially for the registration procedures, we have to know that Brussels has a particular way of proceeding because of the lack of available spots in the local system. So looking at Brussels, we know that Brussels has more than 1 million inhabitants, and we see that more than a third of the population is expat, and among that we have a third that do come from the EU. There is a huge diversity of spoken languages, and the school population in Brussels is distributed as follows. So we see that actually the major part of students living in and children living in Brussels do go to a French-speaking school. So there are more French-speaking than Dutch-speaking schools for Brussels. A smaller proportion go to Dutch-speaking schools, and we still have a minor proportion going to private or international schools. So as I was mentioning before, there are in Brussels existing alongside three main systems. We have the local system. It's also called the public or governmental system, and these are all schools that are funded by the government. They are free of charge for the parents, except for some activities or special expenses. These schools do provide education only in Dutch or French. For Dutch-speaking school, there is the obligation to teach French, and for French-speaking schools, there is the obligation to teach Dutch. The main concern with that system is the long waiting list. They have, as I was mentioning before, we are facing in Brussels the problem of the lack of spots in schools. So the waiting lists are extremely long. The registration system is a bit rigid, and the education, that does not remove the quality of the education. The education is extremely good in public schools, even though you can see unequal levels and reputations among a same system. And that explains why for some schools that have actually the best reputation, there are very long waiting lists. Then going to the international system, we have in Brussels many international schools offering education in English, in Dutch, in French or German. There is even a Japanese school in Oudergem. The availabilities are much larger. The registration procedures are much more flexible, but the tuition fee is extremely high. So we see that actually most of the time the tuition or the registration and the enrollment with international school is most of the time supported by companies that do send expats abroad. For people, local people, it's almost non-affordable. The international system gives access to the international baccalaureate, and there are some schools that do prepare their students to the IB, and that's I would say a full system that we will not be discussing today. Then we have the semi-private school or the metered school. These schools are available in Brussels and providing education in English, French, and Dutch. The availabilities are also larger. The registration procedure is also flexible. Somehow they can find funding with the government and then only ask for a reduced registration fee to the parents. Here, for the sake of the overview and the clarity, I made a clear distinction between free and then those very high tuition fees and then the lower tuition fees. It is true that you will find some schools that are in between, but it is more for you to have an overview of what is available. The education is based on alternative methods like la méthode Freinet, Montessori, Steiner. There are a lot of Montessori schools. Of course, the solidity of the education is still discussed and it's depending from one school to the other. Just to give you an overview on the administrative side of teaching and education in Brussels, I think you know a bit how complex the political background is in Belgium. So we have a federal government, we have governments at community level, and we have a government at regional level. To make a long story short, I should say that regional competencies are related to territory, and community competencies are related to language and culture. And that explains why education, which is language-based, falls under the authority of the community. And we have la Fédération de Wallonie-Bruxelles providing education in Belgium for Brussels and Wallonia, and we have the Dutch-speaking education that is handled by the Flemish community for Flanders and a part of Brussels. We also see that there is a social polarization in Brussels. So the south east versus northwest. We will go through that point a little bit further in the presentation, but it's important to mark that there is I would say it's more a rumor, an education, a reputation that education is better in some parts of Brussels than in others. I would not stop by that consideration. There are a lot of very good schools even located in, let's say, the wrong or the scary, more scary areas of Brussels. I think, yes, Pauline, if we could go to the next slide, please. Then again, if you want to orientate a little bit in the landscape of the education in Brussels, we should know that even in the public system, we have a distinction between the free and the official network. Free network is partially funded by the government and partially funded by some other sources. and the official network is 100% funded by the government. There is another distinction, which is confessional versus non-confessional. The Catholic network is still very strong and has a reputation to provide good education. Non-confessional is what it says, so there is no faith or religious background in the education, and they do also provide quality education. You will have the presentation later on, and by clicking on those two links, you will find all education networks available in Flanders and all education networks available in Fédération de Wallonie, Bruxelles. So that's the question I was mentioning before about the line we could cross through Brussels, saying that actually the northwest part of the city has, let's say, a bad reputation among expats, whereas the southeast part of Brussels is supposed to have a good reputation. I would like to insist on the fact that this is all stats. So in one part, there are more people with a high social economic index living, and in the other part, it's the opposite. My recommendation is to not stick to that conclusion or to that reputation before you choose the place to live, and of course not before you choose the school for your children. There are very good schools in both parts of Brussels, and that's extremely important to know. We are all aware of the efforts the government has made to mix the population in the schools, and the outcome of those efforts is the décret inscription that you may have heard, or the Pacte d'Excellence. These are initiatives of the French-speaking government community, but the outcome of those measures are highly discussed. We're not sure, we are all doubting about the efficiency, but we should not blame the idea, which was to bring more mixity into the schools. We won't take a philosophy lesson today. My message here is do not stick to that repetition between north and south before choosing a schools. There are very good schools in both parts of Brussels. So if we have a look at a curriculum, a common run in both systems, we know that from 2.5 years to 6 years, we have l'école maternelle. The school obligation started at the age of 3, but since September 2020, you will have to start sending your children at school from the age of 5. Between 5 and 12, we have what we call the primary school, l'école primaire. It's basisschool in the Dutch system. Then you have l'école secondaire, or the middelbare school, from the age of 12 to the age of 18. And then from the age of 18 onwards, we have what we call des études supérieures, or hoger onderwijs, with many options going from university to high schools. Just a few last note. School obligation is mandatory till the age of 16. full-time, and then till the age of 18 you have to go to school at least part-time, and you can combine that with a job that is related to what you're studying. Let's have a look at some particularities of the local system in Brussels. Immersion schools are very popular in Brussels. Immersion schools are actually bilingual schools, which means that and they are extremely developed in the French-speaking system. What is an immersion school? It is a school where teaching is provided in French. So French is the main language, but more and more classes will be given in Dutch for the student to learn both languages throughout all the curriculum. Most of the time it works that way. If you're going in a French-speaking immersion school, you would have indeed French as the overall and main language, but in the first classes you would have a lot of lessons given in Dutch, and that would be lowered till the end of the curriculum. So in the first year of primary you would have a lot of lessons given in Dutch, and at the end of the curriculum you would have more lessons given in French, to make sure that both languages are kept on a good level. You have that for French and Dutch, you have that for French and English as well. In the Dutch system, there are a few schools that did the same. I mean that they have a Dutch-speaking education with quite some lessons given in French, with a lot of lessons given in French at the beginning of the curriculum, and then reducing that amount till towards the end. I'm not sure in the Dutch system that has passed the phase of the experiment. To my information that I have today, there are no schools in the Dutch-speaking system that are still using the immersion. Then you may have heard of the PISA survey outcome that was done a couple of years ago to assess the level of and the quality of education in Belgium towards all other countries, and we see that the Dutch speaking system does have a much higher score than the French speaking system. Again, I would like to insist on the fact that these are stats. So there are schools within the French speaking system that do have a very good score. The problem is somewhere else. So it's good to have to be aware of those studies and outcomes, but do not base your choice definitely on this kind of conclusions. Another question that needs to be raised is the functioning of Dutch-speaking schools in Brussels. You may know that, or have noticed, if you have your children in a Dutch-speaking school of Brussels, that actually 80 to 90% of the children are originally French-speaking. How does that come? How does that come? So a lot of French-speaking families want their children to learn Dutch. That's one explanation. That makes a lot of sense. But as a result, we have the Dutch-speaking schools filled with children that do speak French at home. At the end, they will speak both languages. And that's still a very feasible and realistic solution where when the proportion of Dutch-speaking and French-speaking children still makes the level of language good enough to provide good education. In other words, if a teacher has to give a math lesson in Dutch to a class where 80% of the children do not master the language, then we come to a problem, right? The level of education will be compromised. That's why in the registration and enrollment procedure and the attribution of spots to children in the Dutch-speaking system, they have thought of a range of criteria that take into account the language ability of the child and the parents. We'll go through that later on in the registration procedure. Then I added here 2 links to the décret inscription et le pacte d'excellence. If you really want to dig into the arguments of the government to rule the French-speaking education the way they do it, you can have a look at that. But to me, it's quite frustrating. It's not. These are not documents that really come to the point, but it's interesting to have a look at, just to have an idea of what's happening in the background of those decisions. Another particularity is applicable for the commune à facilité, or the faciliteiten gemeenten. So to describe them on a very simple way, the communes à facilité are, for example, communes that are in the region of Flanders. So geographically, they are in Flanders, but the population is mainly French-speaking. So for those persons, so let's say belonging to the majority of French-speaking families and households living in a commune geographically located in Flanders, for those persons, there are some facilities offered by the administration, like being helped at the town hall in your own language, whereas in all other communes, you only are entitled to be assisted in the language of your commune. Another facility offered in those communes is for so a family, a French-speaking family living in a commune à facilité that is Dutch-speaking would have some priority or facilities to have his or her children registered in a French-speaking school. I don't see your faces, so I guess you may have questions. I'm not sure all explanations I'm giving are extremely clear, but be reassured, we will go through the questions at the end of the presentation. So here you have an overview of the different curriculum that are used in the education provided by La Fédération de Wallonie-Bruxelles and by the education provided by Flanders, or the Flemish community. You will see on the first websites the overview of what a child has to know by the end of the primary school, when they can show that they know that, they will receive a diploma. The diploma is the CEB in the French-speaking system, le certificat d'études de base, and it is called the getuigschrift basisonderwijs, BAO, in the Flemish community system. In Flanders, you will receive that getuigschrift, that diploma, with a 1A or a 1B mention. 1A mention gives you access to the general curriculum, which is actually the most open one. The 1B diploma will give you to access to the beroep or technisch onderwijs, which is actually professional or technical curriculum. And this is, let's say, something that would bring you faster into the professional sector, but would not grant you an easy access to higher education. You have the same kind of distinction in the secondary school programs, and these are for the French-speaking system. You have one curriculum which is called transition, means actually transition to a higher education, university or higher schools, and qualification that is to compare with beroep of technisch in the Flemish system, and it is actually the curriculum that will give you a faster access to professional life, but without going through the higher school. And these are indeed then jobs like HORECA, technicians, some nursery schools, all that is available on the web. You will receive at the end of the secondary school in Fédération de Wallonie-Bruxelles, le CESS, le certificat d'études secondaires supérieures, and in Flanders, getuigschrift of diploma secundair onderwijs says what it says, a diploma of secondary education. You will have more information on both systems on the websites listed on the bottom line. So how to register? That's a hard part. Let me go through the slides and I will get back to you if you have questions at the end of the presentation. So first, regarding the Dutch-speaking schools, there is a distinction to be done between Brussels and schools located in Flanders outside of Brussels. You will find a lot of information in those websites that are extremely well done. The information is exhaustive and it's available in English as well. So in Brussels, we use a priority system. So the government has set a range of criteria based on the language and the social economic index. So priority is given in order of importance. First, to brothers and sisters of students of the school and to children of teachers of that same school. Then we have a language-based criteria. More spots are made available for children that do speak Dutch, and you have to show that the child and the parents speak Dutch. And I can, if you're interested, I can inform you later on how to show that. And there is also a criteria related to the social economic index of the family. We have what we call the Rijckevorsel, so the children that do not have excuse me, Corona intervention. So let me get back to what I was saying. Yes, talking about the priority system in the Dutch-speaking system. So it's also based on the social economic index. Rijckevorsel is gelijks onderwijskansen, means that we want to give the same opportunity to learn to all children, and therefore give priority to children that do not have, that do live in a family without a steady income or without a mother that does not have enough diploma to support the education. It's not a free choice anymore, still due to the lack of spots in Brussels. The government has set up a lottery system so that the parents will give in a list of schools, the preferred schools, and within that list, with a lottery system, you will be attributed a spot. We'll see later on how that happens practically. It's being discussed, so this system could change. They announced some changes 2 years ago, 1 year ago again, but nothing has changed yet. We see a very nice development. It is the building of new schools. You can have a look at the Tiener School and Comenius College. There is also a new school in Schaerbeek, that keeps on going on, that building and establishment of new schools. The registration period is for this year from 2 to 31st of March. So where the parents need to give in the list of preferred schools, and based on that, there will be an allocation message sent by the 8th of May this year. It's important to know that even though the message can be not positive on the 8th of May, still a lot of things can change till the 31st of August. And again, all information is very is given on a very detailed way on Inschrijven in Brussels. If you want to check school by school the available spots, they have the obligation to publish on their website before the 19th of December how many spots they have available. Then they update on the 27th of January based on how many spots will be taken by brothers and sisters and children of staff, and by yes.
So we have a question from Christina, asking if this is only for the first year or of the secondary, or for the other years too.
So this is what I'm. Yes, it's a good question. It's a very good question. So what I'm explaining here is for the first year of the secondary. Yes.
Okay, so, and it's the same.
I should put things another way. This is general, right? So this is general, and we will go more into details later in the presentation on how it works for the primary, for the secondary, first year, or other years. But this is general information.
But it's true, Eléonore, that the information that you share with the website Inschrijven in Brussels, for instance, are for the first primary school and for the secondary school?
No, it's secondary and primary and all years, right? So the priority system, the lottery, the fact that it's being discussed, that there are new schools, and the registration period, that is valid for all years. They are more strict for the first years. So we will see later on how it works for the first years versus the other years. It's each school has more room for other years than the first one, but the theory is this one and is applicable for all years of each curriculum, primary and secondary.
Thank you.
Yes. So for the Dutch-speaking schools, not in Brussels but in Flanders, We won't go through that now because our focus is Brussels, but still you can find a lot of information in the website that is given here on Onderwijs Vlaanderen onderwijsaanbod. Look, and yes, and now we will have a look at the French-speaking schools for Brussels and Wallonia. We have for the primary system only a waiting list system. So one idea would be to check on that website the available spots per school. You have to know that that website is not 100% updated. So the best would be to look around the place where you live and check with the schools that you like if they have spot. Even if you hear that there is no spot for your child, I would say keep on trying, keep on giving a chance. You will always be allowed to register on a waiting list, and you'll see what comes out. The secondary is for the first year here. There is a priority system based on the distance with the place where you live and the place where you work, plus priority for the teachers' children and students' brothers and sisters. Again, all that information is available on a website that will be shared after in the presentation on the page with all useful websites. For the first year, you need to know that once you have registered with on the assigned week with the formulaire unique d'inscription that is due to be submitted already this year. Once this is done, the CIRI will allocate places, and they do that on 2 batches. The first one covers the months of March and April, and the second one is from April till August. So the lucky ones will have a spot attributed in the first batch, but the other ones really do not need to despair because a lot of things will still move. We know that many parents will register their children in different schools to make sure that they have a spot at least in one of the schools. So the waiting list will move a lot after the results of the first batch. For the secondary, we have, it's more case by case. It's similar, I would say, to the primary schools enrollment system. If there are schools that you like, you call them, you explain the situation, and in many cases, they find a solution. So we can all agree that the tricky year is the first year of maternelle or the first year of primary, because if you are in maternelle, you have priority for the primary if both curriculum are in the same schools, and anyway for the first year of secondary. A question that we hear often: for schools that do offer primary and secondary education, is there a priority for students of the primary to register for the secondary? Answer is no. That you are a pupil of primary or not, you have to go through the same registration procedure if you want to attend secondary in the same school. So which experience would you like to live? So that's the first question one should ask himself when choosing a school. Of course, there is language. You may have an affinity with one language rather than the other. You may also want to better understand how the life looks like in the school and around the school. How far is it from home? What for impact would that have on the social and daily life of your child and your family, actually? Then most of us will also want to have a clear look and view on which perspective it gives for higher education. That's why the diploma offered by the school is a crucial question before choosing for a curriculum or the other. Then, coming from abroad, I think the key question is integration. We all say that if you want to find a right house, a right home, you have to think about location, location, location. If you want to find the right school, then I think what we have to think of is integration, integration, integration. It's integration of the children, but it's also integration of the family. It's integration in the school, but it means also a lot for the integration in your new life. You need to find and to feel affinity with the school where you will be enrolling your children, because it's your children's school, but it will become your school, especially in the primary curriculum. How can you assess those questions per school? You have indeed a lot of information on the website. I would say the objective information, like the amount of children, the address, the language, the pedagogic project. So this is very objective information that is available on the website, but you can also ask for the reputation of the school. Each school has fancy fairs, open doors, and info sessions. I would say fancy fairs do take place most of the time between April and June. This year, probably not. Open doors are organized throughout all the year, and info sessions on demand. So if we want to have to set up an action plan when you want to look for a school, I would first check geographically where you live and what are the nicest schools around you. And then from there, you seek for information for those schools. It is true that the question for secondary school has a bit of another setting, because when children go to secondary school, the geographic distance is not very important. Children are much more autonomous. They take public transportation, and they all do that. So it's not a problem for you living in Etterbeek to send your children to school downtown. So then the first question would be maybe asking around to your friends and children friends, which schools do they have in mind for their children, and then gathering and making your own idea, attending the open doors and the information sessions. And just as a side note, you can always send us a mail or give us a call if you need some advice on a particular school. So if we have a look at the very particular question of the diploma equivalency, that's very important when you come from abroad to Belgium in the middle of a curriculum or at the end of a curriculum, intending to pursue your studies in Belgium, or when you have studied in Belgium but you need to have a diploma equivalency to pursue your studies or get a job abroad. So the most important thing is to keep your records. Always keep your children records with you and be ready to ask for equivalence. Depending on the curriculum or the system you're enrolled with, Dutch speaking or French speaking, there are different services that do provide that equivalency. And there is also a European organization called ENIC-NARIC, who will provide you with the necessary guidance to get the equivalency for higher education diploma. Still on diplomas equivalencies, if you have a diploma of any kind that is recognized, the diploma equivalency will be much faster. So you have the international baccalaureate that's of course internationally recognized, and to get that diploma's equivalency you have one single point of contact called the IBO. You have also the EU baccalaureate with one point of contact called the URSC. It's an online tool, so feel free to have a look and see how it works. I would like to add to that information that in the secondary curriculum, there is a way to have a diploma if you did not or was not able to follow the traditional curriculum. It's what we call the jury. It's J-U-R-Y. You have the petit jury, and that's for the 3 first years of education of the secondary system curriculum, and you have the jury central for the 3 last years of the secondary. Passing those exams will give you the diploma even though you could not attend the lessons as a regular student to in a recognized education organ or schools. Again, if you have questions or if you are in the situation where you would like to know more about those jury, let us know. Here, an overview of the useful websites. Just to give you an outline for each of them. The first one is from the federal government, so that is the starting point if you're just wondering how to study in Belgium in the public sector, so French or Dutch. Then you have a very useful website called Le Médiateur. We went very fast through the registration processes and formalities. This can be sometimes a bit of a struggle or a challenge at least. We are there to help you, but the Médiateur is also a public service that is aimed at helping people struggling with the administration, and they have a section, a department allocated to school registration questions. Then you have the directory. It's the list of schools, French-speaking schools. Brussels Wallonia Federation also has its own website, 2 websites about so the teaching in general and then how to register. They also have a free call, a toll-free number, and an email address. I can tell you that they are extremely helpful and reactive. So don't hesitate. They give very good guidance and they do take it up for you. Regarding the Flemish government, then we have onderwijsinbrussel.be, and they also have an English-speaking website. And again, the information provided is very accurate and extremely up-to-date. EU equivalency, you have those websites. So you have the information published by the European Commission. You have the Ploteus database and the Eric Narik service. And regarding the French-speaking system, you have the Service des Équivalences, and the same for the Dutch-speaking system. Is a very long one, but it's gelijkswaardigheidserkenning van een buitenlands diploma getuigschrift. That's it for the useful website. I would like to leave room for questions now. When I usually do that presentation, there is much more interaction in the presentation itself. So I hope you were able to note down all questions that were not answered, and I will be there now to address them. Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, everyone.
Do you have any question or anything that you'd like to know? Okay, so we thank you all very much for your attention, and we will follow up with the presentation as well as the record of the session. And please stay all safe and take good care of yourself and your family members, and have a very good day. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.